Welcome to our topic on the scientific method and scientific beginnings of understanding human development across the lifespan. But first, a historic moment. Issa Rae makes history as the first person to receive the key to the city of Inglewood. In 2010, Issa Rae tweeted, "When I grow up, I want to be a more successful version of me." Recently, Twitter did a campaign called Tweet It Into Existence. And since tweeting those words into existence, the media mogul Issa Rae created the groundbreaking series Insecure, which included in its fifth and final season a scene of Issa Rae's character, a character named Issa, being given the key to the city of Inglewood. So I thought this was so cool because it started off with a hope and a dream, and now it has been manifested. So, yay history and yay historic moments. Okay, I wonder what you could manifest into existence. Not by tweeting it necessarily, but maybe by writing it somewhere down, ways that you want to develop through this class, through this semester, through this lifetime, through this lifespan. I wonder what you could manifest into existence. Okay. Scientific beginnings. Scientific research requires a hypothesis and some kind of way to test the hypothesis and ways to present what we found. And so there's infinite ways to go about finding out mysteries and solving the riddle and the secrets of the human mind. Because there's so many ways to go about doing that, scientists need some sort of order, to the chaos. So, to create order from chaos, scientists created the scientific method, and it has the same steps every time, and that allows us to have I keep saying ordered, but like a predictable way of talking about how we unravel the secrets of the mind. So really, I have here hypothesis, but as you have seen in this lecture content page, the scientific method really starts with an observation. Because you have to observe what's going on and become aware of it, there's that self-awareness. You have to be aware of something happening before you can go about tackling and solving its mysteries. So after we observe something, we predict what might happen. We create a hypothesis, a prediction drawn from a theory. Then we have research methods. We will create a bunch of activities for the people to complete because we've made an observation that interested us. And then we design a research project, which is our overall plans for the research study. Common research methods in developmental psychology and how we study lifespan development include systemic observations, self-reports, clinical or case studies, and ethnographies. One systemic observation is the naturalistic observation. This is done in the field or in the real life environment. Behavior is recorded in the natural environment. So say you want to study chimpanzees, you would not do that in the zoo. You would go to where chimpanzees live in the wild and you would observe them in their natural habitat. In naturalistic observations, we must understand that not all individuals have the same opportunity to display behavior. And one limitation is that you cannot control conditions. Of course, you're in the natural environment. You can't control the jungle, or you can't control the real life environment because that's what you are there to observe. Naturalistic observations provide information about actual behavior, but does not reveal the reasoning behind the responses. We also have, under systematic observation, a second kind of observation, and that is the structured kind. This is a laboratory situation set up to evoke certain behaviors. All participants do have an equal chance to display behavior, but they may not be typical of participants' everyday behaviors, meaning that if I know I'm in a research study, I might do something different than if I know nobody's watching. And that will, of course, affect the research study results. So with both naturalistic and structured observations, or both types of systematic observations rather, systematic observations provide information about actual behavior, but again, they do not reveal the reasoning behind the responses. The second type of common research method is the self-report. Self-reports include the clinical interview, in which the researchers ask questions in a flexible conversational style. These reflect everyday life and provide large amount of information in a short amount of time. One limitation is that it may not result in accurate reporting of information because, of course, people lie, and also we are humans, and so sometimes we fall prey to self-deception. We think we're doing one thing, we think we're acting one way, but we're not. We're not perfect, and that is obvious in self-reported interviews. There's also a second type, which is the structured interview, in which participants is asked the same set of questions in the same way. This does allow for comparisons of responses, and it's an efficient way to collect data, especially because the same questions are asked the same way. So I have this sign, please stay on the path. Don't veer off. If it's not on the clipboard, you can't ask the question. However, one limitation is that it is not as in-depth as a clinical interview. The third common research method in developmental psychology is the clinical study method or the case study method. This brings together information from a variety of sources to produce a complete picture as possible of a single individual. The criticism is that it may be influenced by researcher bias, and conclusions may not be generalized to anyone else other than the person studied. But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't study them. And finally, ethnography is directed towards understanding the cultural meanings of behavior through participant observation. It's a mix and a hodgepodge of observations, self-reports, and interpretation by the investigator, because the investigator is observing the participant. Maybe it's in their culture or it's a distinct social group. Investigators may observe selectively or misinterpret what they see because we're not perfect and we can't see what we can't see. And another criticism is, or a limitation rather, is that findings cannot be assumed to be generalized beyond the people and the setting of that particular research study. Here's an infographic of ethnography, or writing about people. Ethno means people, graphy means writing. So an ethnography researcher must be fluent in the language of the people under study, of course. Usually it's a study of daily life over a long period of time, 1 to 2 years. Usually in a specific location, such as a village or a town, and that's where the researcher has to stay as well. And the researcher or the ethnographer really has to establish mutual trust with a range of local people. Okay. If a researcher does this, then they will be more likely to observe people acting naturally. If there is no trust, the people might be acting differently when there's like a weird researcher writing what they're doing all the time. Of course, there are cultural influences, and taking a snapshot at immigrant youths adapting to a new land. Many immigrant youths adapt surprisingly well. They are less likely to commit delinquent and violent acts, use drugs and alcohol, less likely to have early sex, and less likely to miss school because of illness or suffer from obesity. They report just as favorable and at times higher self-esteem as do young people with native-born parents. And some ethnographic research has found immigrant youth are strongly influenced by their allegiance to their family and community, and that there are tensions between what the family values and what the culture that they immigrated to values. So this is some example of what we have learned about people as a result of ethnographic research, as a result of studying development. Because again, ethnography is directed toward understanding the cultural meanings of behavior through participant observation. Let's move on to numbers. We can also investigate human behavior using two main types of research design. So let's see, we move from research methods to research design. The correlational design reveals the relationship between participants' characteristics and their behavior or development. Researchers are allowed to gather information on individuals without altering their experiences. However, it does not allow researchers to infer cause and effect. So we have here in this image another naturalistic observation. We've seen that before. Then there's the survey method, and there's archival research. A correlational coefficient describes how two variables are associated with each other, because in correlational research design, we're looking at how variables are associated with each other. Does variable A cause variable B? Maybe we can't say that because we can't infer cause and effect. So in research terms, we say, does variable A influence variable B? Variable B. In this figure, we see the meaning of correlational efficiency. The magnitude of the number indicates the strength of the relationship. So the sign of the number, positive or negative, indicates the direction of the relationship. So if it's positive, as variable A increases, so does variable B. Negative means as variable A increases, the other decreases, variable B decreases. Pardon me. If there's no correlational efficient, that means there's no relationship between the two variables. An experimental design uses random assignment of participants to treatment conditions. Researchers then manipulate an independent variable and investigate the effects on a dependent variable. This does allow for cause and effect. However, a limitation is that findings obtained in the laboratory may not apply to everyday situations. So just because A caused B in the lab doesn't mean A will cause B out on the road in nature. There are two types of variables. There's an independent variable and the dependent variable. The independent variable is the one that we're manipulating. The investigator gets to manipulate it, and that's the one that we expect to cause changes in another variable. The dependent variable is measured, but it's not manipulated. It's expected or hypothesized to be influenced by the independent variable. Modified experimental designs include field experiments, natural or quasi experiments, in which investigators compare treatments that already exist. In the field experiment, participants are assigned randomly to treatment conditions. So I might conduct a field experiment in a mall setting, perhaps. That's the field. Then I mentioned a natural or quasi experiment. This compares differences in treatments that already exist. Groups are chosen to ensure that their characteristics are as much alike as possible. So you might have a medical treatment trial where you randomly assign subjects to a treatment, treatment A or treatment B, and then time goes by and you compare differences in the treatments of treatment A and treatment B that already exist. Designs for studying development include the longitudinal design, in which participants are studied repeatedly at different ages, the cross-sectional design, in which groups of people differing in age are studied at the same point in life, or same point in time, rather, and sequential, meaning that there's several similar cross-sectional or longitudinal studies that are being conducted at once. So you have a couple longitudinal, a couple cross-sectional. Talk about multitasking. Problems in conducting longitudinal research include participant dropout, practice effects, and cohort effects, which the book goes into deeper detail. The cross-sectional design, because every up has a down, every strength has a limitation. The cross-sectional design may also suffer from cohort effects and does not provide evidence about development at the individual level. So to overcome some of these limitations, researchers may use sequential designs, in which they have a couple of longitudinal studies going on, or a couple of cross-sectional studies going on at the same time, or in other words, sequences of studies. Research that combines an experimental strategy with either a longitudinal or cross-sectional approach is becoming increasingly common. And here is a neat little table of summarizing all of the strengths and limitations of the research designs used in human development. Ethical concerns in research are especially complex when participants are children or older adults. The Institutional Review Board, or IRB, is an organization that balances the cost of the research to the participants against the potential value of the study. So is it worth it to put people through what we're going to put them through if it means we're going to find out information that you're saying is valuable to society? And the IRB always votes in favor and preference to the participants' interest. We got to protect people from other people who might want to research and find answers at all costs. The principle of informed consent requires special interpretation when participants, including younger children and adults who are cognitively impaired, cannot fully appreciate the research and activities. Informed consent means you explain all of the risks and costs and benefits of a study before starting the study. So you can't say, okay, do this study. All right, now that the study's over, you're not allergic to anything, are you? Because that's a huge risk. No, so you have to inform and alert people before they sign on and give them a chance to read the terms and conditions. Kind of like your iTunes or whatever contract you have, subscription you have with Amazon Prime. You have to read and give your consent and say, yes, I consent. I allow you to do what you say you're going to do, no more and no less. And I'll sign it. Once I sign it, now you can do everything you said you're going to do. When deception and concealments are used in research, debriefing must occur after the research session is over. So after the research session, if part of the research study involved purposefully lying to people to trick them for the purpose of the study, then after the study, you have to debrief them immediately afterwards and let them know, hey, you're not really in danger, or hey, when I played that, when I told you that someone hurt their leg in the hallway, it was actually a recording, so it's okay. You know, you have to debrief people, let them know that you were playing mind games with them. Many experts believe that deception should be used with children only if the risk of harm is minimal. So it's funny, you kind of think about, you go somewhere and you see a sign and it says something really strange. It's like, do not stand on hole. You're like, that's weird. That means that somebody had to stand on the cliff in order for someone to put the sign up there that says, don't do that. So we have this group of people who work for IRB, Institutional Review Board. They have to review and say, no, you can't put children through that, actually. No, you can't you can't inject these things with people. That's not safe. Even if it means we might have a cure, we've decided that that's not safe. So it's like, we had to have been doing some weird things experimenting on humans in order for a whole group to be created and to protect us from ourselves. So if you ever participate in a research project, you as a participant, I want you to come away from this lecture knowing that you have rights. You have the right to be protected from harm. You have the right to be informed before you participate, which also gives you the right to reject and say no. You have the right to privacy. You have the right to know the results, and you have the right to beneficial treatments. You are a legal adult because you're taking this class. And so please be aware of this for yourself, as well as for the children in your lives, as well as the adults with cognitive impairment who may not be informed or really understand what it means to have a right. Okay, now that you know your rights, you can fight for the people. You are the people. I will see you in our lecture on psychological developmental theorists. Bye now.